In 68 years of life, Dr. Nathan Wright never imagined his final moments would unfold beneath the merciless Serengeti sun, blood pooling between his trembling fingers as he stared into the amber eyes of a lioness. His heart medication lay forgotten in his cabin, 6,000 miles from the Montana home where Abby's empty chair still waited. The lioness's labored breathing mirrored his own, both fighting for life at the edge of the savannah. Behind him, Dr. Emily Parker's clipboard clattered to the ground. "Nathan, get back!" she screamed, her scientific composure shattered by primal fear. He remembered Abby's words the night before she died. "Promise you'll see Africa for both of us." How strange that in fulfilling that promise, he might join her sooner than expected. "Don't move," he whispered to himself and the suffering creature before him. Either we both survive this, or neither of us will. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Nathan Wright had never considered himself a sentimental man. 40 years as a veterinarian in Bozeman, Montana, had taught him that life was as practical as it was precious. Animals lived, suffered, healed, and died. He had been their caretaker, their advocate, their last comfort. But since Abby's death 8 months ago, the practicality that had defined his life seemed hollow. "You need to find something, Nate," Dr. Hammerson had told him during his last checkup, the terminal diagnosis still hanging in the air between them. 6 months isn't a death sentence. It's an opportunity to live deliberately. The irony wasn't lost on Nathan. After a lifetime of saving others, his own heart was betraying him. Their modest 2-story home on Pine Creek Road now felt cavernous. Abby's reading glasses still perched on her nightstand, her gardening gloves stiffened with disuse in the mudroom. The silence was the worst part. No soft humming from the kitchen, no gentle chiding about tracking mud across her clean floors. "We'll go to Africa when you retire," she had said for 20 years. "See the Serengeti, the Great Migration." But retirement came, and then came the cancer, swift and merciless. Africa remained a fading photograph in a travel book on their coffee table. The Serengeti Research Center accepted his volunteer application with reluctance. "We typically require longer commitments," Dr. Emily Parker had written in her email, "and your age and limited field experience are concerns." What she didn't know was that a 6-month commitment was exactly what his cardiologist had given him. The research center was a cluster of buildings on the edge of Tanzania's Serengeti National Park, utilitarian, sun-bleached, and humming with purpose. Emily Parker was younger than he expected, her handshake firm, her gaze assessing. "I've read your veterinary background, Doctor." "Right," she said, leading him to a small cabin that would be his home. "But domestic and zoo experience doesn't necessarily translate to wild behavioral research." Nathan smiled, setting down his worn leather duffel. "I delivered my first calf when I was 12, Dr. Parker. I've had my arm inside more species than most people could name. I'm not here to revolutionize your research, just to help where I can." What he didn't tell her was about the small cedar box of Abby's ashes in his bag, or the promise he'd made to scatter them where the acacia trees punctuated the endless grasslands. He didn't mention the nitroglycerin tablets he kept in his pocket, or how each morning he wondered if it would be his last. "We've been tracking a pride with some unusual behaviors," Emily said, pulling up footage on her tablet. "Particularly this female we've named Makina. She's pregnant, but something's not right." On the screen, a lioness with a distinctive facial scar paced restlessly near a watering hole. Even through the grainy footage, Nathan could see the heaviness in her movements, the discomfort in her stance. "How long has she been showing these symptoms?" he asked, professional interest momentarily eclipsing his personal mission. Emily glanced up, perhaps surprised by the precision of his question. 3 days. Why?" Because, Nathan said, studying the footage more closely, if I'm not mistaken, she's going to need help soon. Very soon. The African dawn broke over the Serengeti in a symphony of crimson and gold, painting the endless grasslands in warm light. Nathan sat on the small porch of his cabin, swallowing his morning medication with lukewarm coffee. He'd unpacked Abby's urn last night, placing it on the windowsill where the first rays of sunlight would touch it. "Quite a view, isn't it, old girl?" he whispered. 8 months since her passing, and he still spoke to her as if she might answer. The doctors had called it complicated grief. Nathan called it 46 years of habit. His cabin door creaked open behind him, startling him from his reverie. Emily Parker stood there, already dressed in her khaki field clothes, clipboard in hand, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "We're heading out in 20 minutes to check camera traps," she said, all business. "If you're still interested in seeing Makina's pride." Nathan nodded, pocketing his pill bottle. "I'll be ready." The research center's Land Rover bounced along the rutted trail, kicking up dust that hung in the still morning air. Emily drove with the confidence of someone who knew every bump and turn by heart. 2 research assistants, fresh-faced graduate students named Ben and Lucia, sat in the back, discussing tracking data in hushed, excited tones. "So, what brought you all the way to Tanzania, Dr. Wright?" Emily asked, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. "Most retired vets I know prefer golf courses to wildlife reserves." Nathan smiled faintly. "My wife always wanted to come here. I'm fulfilling a promise." "She didn't want to make the trip herself?" "She died 8 months ago. Cancer." Nathan kept his voice neutral, practiced in delivering the information without inviting pity. Emily's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We had 46 good years." "More than many get." He turned to look out the window, effectively ending that line of conversation. The Land Rover crested a small rise, and suddenly the Serengeti stretched before them in its full glory, a vast ocean of golden grass swaying in the morning breeze, punctuated by the occasional acacia tree, its canopy spread like an umbrella against the brightening sky. "There," Emily pointed toward a cluster of rocks in the distance. "That's where we last tracked Makina's pride." They approached carefully, maintaining a respectful distance. Emily handed Nathan a pair of binoculars. Through the lenses, he could see 3 lionesses lounging in the patchy shade of the rocks. Cubs tumbled nearby, playing with the boundless energy of youth. "Makina is the one with the facial scar," Emily explained. "From a poacher's snare, we think." Nathan scanned the area but didn't see the scarred lioness. "She's not with the pride?" Emily frowned, checking her tablet. "The GPS collar shows she should be within 100 meters. This is unusual. Pregnant females typically stay close to the pride." They spent the next hour observing the lions from a distance. Nathan was struck by how the dynamics reminded him of family groups in any species. The protective instincts, the hierarchy, the casual affection. It made the absence of Makina all the more concerning. "There," Lucia suddenly pointed to the west. "By the acacia thicket." Nathan raised his binoculars again. Makina moved slowly through the tall grass, her pregnant belly heavy and low. Even from this distance, he could see something was wrong. Her gait was labored, her head hanging lower than normal. "She's in distress," Nathan said quietly. Emily studied the lioness through her own binoculars. "She's heavily pregnant. That's to be expected." "No, this is different." Nathan's 40 years of veterinary experience spoke with certainty. "Her posture indicates pain, not just discomfort. See how she keeps stopping to look at her flank? Something's not right with the pregnancy." Emily lowered her binoculars, skepticism evident in her expression. "With all due respect, Dr. Wright, we've been monitoring these lions for years. Pregnancy and birth are natural processes. We observe but don't interfere." "And normally I'd agree with you. But that lioness needs help." I've seen that posture in countless mammals. There could be complications, a breech position, dystocia. This isn't a farm in Montana, Emily said firmly. These are wild animals in a protected reserve. Our protocol is clear. We observe, we document, we learn. We don't intervene unless there's a man-made threat like poaching. Nathan felt a familiar frustration rising. He'd encountered this rigid adherence to protocol throughout his career, often at the expense of common sense. And if she dies? If the cubs die? Then that's nature taking its course, Emily replied, though her voice held less conviction now. It's harsh, but it's how things work out here. The discussion was interrupted by Ben's concerned voice. Dr. Parker, we've got company. A dusty jeep had appeared on the horizon, moving fast across the plain. Even at a distance, Nathan could see it wasn't a park vehicle. The paint was wrong, the profile more rugged. Emily frowned, raising her binoculars. Tourists shouldn't be in this sector. The northern portion is closed for research. As the vehicle drew closer, Nathan could make out a single occupant, a man with a broad-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. Something about his posture, the set of his shoulders, triggered a distant memory in Nathan, but he couldn't place it. I don't like this, Emily muttered, reaching for the radio. Control, this is Parker. We have an unauthorized vehicle in Section 7. Can you confirm any registered tours in this area? Over. The radio crackled. Negative, Parker. No authorized tours in Section 7. Could be a local guide off route. Want us to send rangers? Over. Emily hesitated, watching as the jeep slowed to a stop about a quarter-mile away. The driver seemed to be observing something through binoculars. Not them, but something off to the west. Stand by, Control. We'll monitor and report if necessary. Nathan followed the man's line of sight with his own binoculars. With a sinking feeling, he realized the stranger was watching Makina. He's tracking the Lioness, Nathan said quietly. Emily's expression hardened. Poacher? Maybe. Or a trophy hunter who strayed from his permitted area. The man in the jeep suddenly lowered his binoculars, as if sensing he was being watched. He turned, looking directly at their vehicle. Even at this distance, Nathan felt the weight of the stranger's gaze. Then, without warning, the jeep accelerated away, disappearing behind a rise in the landscape. Control, be on the lookout for a gray jeep, single occupant heading east from our position, Emily reported. Possible unauthorized activity. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. The image of Makina's labored movements haunted him, as did the mysterious stranger in the jeep. He sat on his cabin porch, staring at the star-filled African sky that Abby had dreamed of seeing. His heart gave a painful twinge, and he reached for his medication. The pill bottle felt lighter than it should. He'd packed enough for his expected 6-month stay, but with no refills possible in this remote location, each pill was precious. Nathan made a mental note to be more careful with his dosage. A soft knock on his door startled him. Emily stood there, her usual composure slightly frayed at the edges. I checked our camera traps after we got back, she said without preamble. Makina hasn't returned to the Pride's resting area. She's isolated herself in the eastern section, near the dry riverbed. Nathan nodded, understanding the significance. She's looking for a birthing den. That's normal behavior. Yes, but... Emily hesitated. I've been reviewing her movements over the past week. You're right, they're not typical, even for a pregnant lioness. And there's something else. She handed him her tablet. The night vision footage showed Makina pacing near the riverbed, but what caught Nathan's attention was a series of small metal objects glinting in the camera's infrared light, partially hidden in the tall grass along a game trail. Snares, he said grimly. Emily nodded. Set recently? Right in her path to the water source. The man in the jeep? Possibly. I've alerted the anti-poaching unit, but they're dealing with an incident on the western boundary. They won't reach this sector until tomorrow afternoon. Nathan handed the tablet back, decision already made. Then we go at first light. Clear the snares before she or any of the Pride encounters them. Emily studied him for a moment. Protocol says, "To hell with protocol," Nathan interrupted, surprising himself with his vehemence. "You know as well as I do that those snares weren't set by locals looking for bushmeat. They're targeting lions, specifically McKenna's Pride." After a long moment, Emily nodded. "First light," she agreed. "Just you and me, quieter that way." As she turned to leave, Nathan called after her, "Why the change of heart about intervention?" Emily paused in the doorway, her silhouette outlined against the starlit sky. "Because you were right this morning, and because I've been tracking McKenna since she was a cub. I'm not supposed to get attached. It's unprofessional, but some animals—" She shrugged, not finishing the thought. Nathan understood perfectly. In his decades as a vet, there had always been certain animals that somehow meant more than others. It wasn't rational, it wasn't scientific, but it was profoundly human. "Get some rest, Dr. Wright," Emily said, stepping into the night. "Tomorrow might be a long day." Nathan watched her go, then turned his gaze back to the stars. "Looks like I might be extending my stay in Africa, Abby," he whispered to the night air. "There's a lioness here who needs help." His heart gave another painful twinge, but this time it wasn't from his condition. It was from a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since Abby's diagnosis had derailed their lives. For the first time in 8 months, Nathan Wright fell asleep with something other than grief occupying his thoughts. Nathan found himself drifting in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of movement and voices around him. The pain in his chest had subsided into a strange numbness, and fleeting images flashed through his mind. Abby's smile, Michael as a boy, McKenna's amber eyes meeting his own. "We're losing him!" someone shouted. "Starting compressions again!" The pressure on his chest was distant, as if happening to someone else. He felt himself floating above it all, watching the frantic scene below with detached curiosity. Michael's face appeared, contorted with grief and determination. "Dad, stay with me. Don't you dare give up now." Nathan wanted to reassure his son that it was okay, that this was always how it might end. He'd come to Africa knowing his heart was failing, accepting that he might not return. But he'd found Michael again. He'd saved McKenna and her cubs. Perhaps that was enough. The cave seemed to be dissolving around him, replaced by a bright, encompassing light. And in that light, he thought he saw Abby, her arms outstretched, her smile radiant, as it had been before the cancer. "Not yet, Nathan," she seemed to say. "They still need you." The light receded abruptly, replaced by excruciating pain as his body was jolted with electricity. Nathan gasped, his lungs burning as they filled with air. The world came rushing back in a cacophony of sound and sensation, the whirring of helicopter blades, the urgent voices of medical personnel, the steady beep of monitoring equipment. "We've got him back," someone announced. "Heart rhythm stabilizing." Nathan forced his eyes open, finding Michael's face hovering above him, streaked with tears and dust. "Dad?" His son's voice broke on the single syllable. Nathan couldn't speak, couldn't move, but he managed to hold his son's gaze, communicating with his eyes what his voice couldn't. "I'm still here." The next days passed in a blur of medical procedures and gradual awakenings. Nathan learned he'd been airlifted to a hospital in Arusha, where doctors had managed to stabilize his critically damaged heart. But the prognosis remained grim. Without a transplant, he had weeks, perhaps a month at most. Michael rarely left his side, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside the hospital bed, making calls to arrange extended leave from his work, video chatting with Rachel to reassure her about her newly discovered grandfather. "She wants to meet you," Michael said one afternoon, showing Nathan a picture of his granddaughter on his phone. "She's been asking about you since I told her you're a veterinarian. She loves animals." Nathan studied the image of the gap-toothed little girl with Abby's eyes and felt a profound ache of regret for all the years lost, all the moments missed with his son and this child he hadn't known existed. "I'd like that," he whispered, his voice still weak. "If there's time." Michael's expression hardened. "There will be time." "The doctors mentioned a transplant. At my age, with my condition?" Nathan shook his head slightly. "Not likely." "You don't get to give up," Michael said firmly. "Not now. Not when we've just found each other again." Before Nathan could respond, a nurse entered with his medication. As she adjusted his IV, she mentioned casually, "Your doctor will be in shortly to discuss your options. There's been a development." That development, as Dr. Kimathi explained an hour later, was the potential availability of a donor heart. A 34-year-old teacher in Nairobi had suffered a fatal aneurysm, and preliminary tests suggested compatibility with Nathan. "This is an extraordinary opportunity," Dr. Kimathi said, his expression serious behind his glasses. "Hearts matching your blood type and tissue profile don't become available often, especially in this region." Nathan listened with a mixture of disbelief and uncertainty. The idea of receiving another person's heart, particularly someone so young, someone who should have had decades ahead of him, was overwhelming. "He chose to be a donor," Michael said, reading his father's hesitation. "His family is honoring his wishes. This is a gift, Dad." A gift. Nathan turned the word over in his mind. His entire journey to Africa had been about fulfilling a promise to Abby, about finding meaning in his final months. He hadn't expected second chances, with his son, with his health, with life itself. As he wrestled with the decision, Emily called from the research center with an update that tipped the scales. She shared footage of Makina and her cubs, now 3 weeks old and thriving under their mother's care. But what struck Nathan most was the lioness's behavior, approaching the research team's cameras, seemingly displaying her cubs deliberately, as if showing them that her family was safe and well. "I've consulted colleagues worldwide," Emily said, her excitement evident even through the video call. "No one has documented this kind of deliberate, non-aggressive approach behavior in wild lions before. It's as if they're, I don't know how else to say it, thanking us." After the call ended, Nathan looked at his son, who had watched the footage with equal amazement. "I'll do it," he said simply. The transplant. Within hours, he was being prepped for transport to Nairobi, where the surgical team was assembling. As the medical staff prepared him for the helicopter flight, Nathan found himself thinking not of death, but of life. The life he might still have, the relationships he might rebuild, the wonders he might yet witness. Michael followed in a chartered plane carrying Abby's urn and the accumulated hopes of a fractured family finding its way back together. The surgery lasted 9 hours. While the surgical team worked to replace Nathan's failing heart with a healthy one from the Nairobi teacher, Michael waited, alternating between pacing the corridors and sitting motionless in the waiting room, sometimes speaking quietly to his mother's urn as if she could intercede on Nathan's behalf. Dawn was breaking over Nairobi when the lead surgeon finally emerged, surgical mask hanging around his neck, fatigue evident in the lines of his face. "He made it through," the doctor said simply. "The new heart is beating on its own." The words seemed too ordinary for their monumental meaning. Michael sank into a chair, overcome by emotions too complex to name. Relief, gratitude, disbelief, hope, all swirling together into a tide that threatened to pull him under. "The next 48 hours are critical," the surgeon continued. "Rejection is still a significant risk. But he's stable for now." When Michael was finally allowed to see his father in the ICU, Nathan lay still beneath a web of tubes and wires, his chest rising and falling with mechanically assisted breaths. Michael approached cautiously, placing a hand gently on his father's arm. "You did it, Dad," he whispered. "Now, you just need to keep fighting." Later that night, as Michael collapsed into bed in his hotel room across from the hospital, his phone buzzed with a message from Emily. It was another video of the lions, McKenna and her cubs resting peacefully near their den in the fading light of day, with Jabari keeping vigilant watch nearby. The caption read, "Some bonds transcend species. The right pride sends their strength." "We're all waiting for Nathan to come home." Michael fell asleep with the phone still in his hand, the image of the watchful lion merging in his dreams with memories of his father, standing guard at his bedside during childhood illnesses, teaching him to fish in Montana streams, and now fighting to return from the threshold of death to reclaim his place in their reconstructed family. In the hospital across the street, Nathan Wright slept a healing sleep, unaware of the network of care surrounding him, from the medical team monitoring his vital signs, to his son dreaming nearby, to a family of lions on the distant savannah, to the spirit of Abby watching over them all. A new heart beat in his chest, establishing its rhythm, bearing witness to a truth as old as life itself, that healing comes in many forms, that bonds once broken can be remade stronger, and that sometimes salvation arrives from the most unexpected sources. The following days established a new rhythm for Nathan. Each morning he would rise before dawn, place his hand on Abby's urn in silent communion, then join Emily for their monitoring rounds. They had cleared the snares near McKenna's chosen birthing area, but the mysterious jeep had been spotted twice more on the periphery of the research zone, always keeping its distance, always disappearing when approached. "He's studying patterns," Nathan observed one evening as they reviewed the day's tracking data in the research center's main cabin. "Learning when we're present and when we're not." Emily nodded, her earlier skepticism of Nathan now replaced with grudging respect. "The anti-poaching units have increased patrols, but they're stretched thin. This drought has poachers coming from all directions." The drought was worsening. What should have been the start of the short rainy season remained bone dry. Watering holes shrank daily, forcing wildlife to congregate at the few remaining sources. It made them vulnerable, predictable. "McKenna hasn't moved from that riverbed area in 3 days, Emily said, pointing to the GPS tracker data on her screen. "She's chosen her birthing den, but something still isn't right. Her movement patterns are erratic." Nathan leaned closer, studying the digital map. "Has Jabari been near her?" The male lion, with his magnificent black mane, was seldom far from McKenna despite his responsibilities to the entire pride. "Not in the last 24 hours, which is unusual." Emily pulled up camera footage showing the rest of the pride. Jabari paced restlessly at their main resting area, occasionally looking in the direction of McKenna's location. "He knows something's wrong," Nathan murmured. "Lions don't know things like that," Emily replied automatically, then caught herself. "At least, that's what the textbooks say." Nathan smiled faintly. 40 years with animals teaches you that textbooks only tell half the story." They fell into a companionable silence, broken only by the distant sound of thunder. Both looked up hopefully, but the sound wasn't repeated. False promise of rain, a common heartbreak in the drought. "Tell me about your wife," Emily said suddenly. The question caught Nathan off guard. "Abby? You mention her often. She must have been special." Nathan's gaze drifted to the window, beyond which the Serengeti night spread vast and star-filled. "She was a high school biology teacher. We met in college. She was studying ferns while I was dissecting cats. Opposites in many ways, but we fit." She never came to Africa with you before? We always said, someday. Nathan's voice carried the weight of regret. I was building my practice. Then she was focused on her teaching. Later, we were putting our son through college. There was always a reason to wait. You have a son? Emily's surprise was evident. Nathan had never mentioned children. Michael. Nathan's expression closed slightly. We haven't spoken in 15 years. Emily seemed to sense the boundary and didn't press further. Instead, she returned to the data. I think we should check on Makina directly tomorrow, not just rely on the GPS and cameras. I agree. If she's chosen that area as her birthing den, she won't leave until the cubs are born and strong enough to move. That makes her vulnerable to predators, to poachers, and to complications if something's wrong with the pregnancy. As if punctuating his words, a proper rumble of thunder rolled across the plains, followed by a brief, intense downpour that drummed on the cabin's metal roof. Both scientists looked up in surprise and relief. First real rain in weeks, Emily said. Let's hope it's enough. It wasn't. The rain lasted barely 15 minutes before the skies cleared again, revealing a moon so bright it cast shadows across the parched landscape. Nathan returned to his cabin later that night, heart heavy with concern for the pregnant Lioness and memories of his own fractured family. He took out the worn photograph he kept in his wallet. Abby, himself, and a teenage Michael on a camping trip to Yellowstone. The last trip they'd taken as a family before everything fell apart. Michael's graduation from high school the following year. His announcement that he was joining the military instead of attending veterinary school as Nathan had always assumed. The argument that followed, words spoken in anger that could never be taken back. I didn't handle it well, Abby, he said to the empty room. You always said I needed to let him find his own path. A soft ping from his tablet interrupted his thoughts. Emily had sent over the latest satellite weather forecast. No significant rain predicted for at least another week. The drought would continue. Morning came with a breathtaking African sunrise that belied the harsh conditions. Nathan and Emily set out early, taking only the essentials for a day in the field. They approached Makina's location with caution, parking the Land Rover a respectable distance away and continuing on foot. Movement in the tall grass at 2 o'clock, Emily whispered, raising her binoculars. It's Jabari. He's made his way to her. Nathan spotted the male lion's distinctive mane among the golden grasses. Jabari moved with purpose, his powerful body low to the ground, heading toward a depression near the dry riverbed where Makina had established her den. He's bringing her food, Nathan observed as the lion dragged a small gazelle carcass. That's a good sign. He's still supporting her. They watched as Jabari approached the den site, calling softly, a deep, rumbling sound unlike his usual roar. After depositing the gazelle, he waited, as if expecting Makina to emerge. When she didn't, he called again, more urgently. Something's wrong, Emily said, lowering her binoculars. She should respond to him. Without waiting for discussion, Nathan began moving forward, staying downwind. Emily hissed in warning but followed after a moment's hesitation. They kept a careful eye on Jabari, who was now pacing outside what appeared to be a small cave in the riverbank. Close enough, Emily whispered when they were about 50 yards away. Any closer, and we risk stressing them both. Nathan raised his binoculars again. From this angle he could see into the shallow cave. Makina lay on her side, her breathing visibly labored even from this distance. She made no move toward the food Jabari had brought, nor did she respond to his calls except with an occasional weak vocalization. She's in trouble, Nathan said, his veterinary instincts screaming warnings. Those are signs of dystocia, difficult birth. She's been in labor too long without progress. We can't interfere, Emily said, but her voice lacked conviction. If we approach now, Jabari will defend her. It's too dangerous. If we don't, she'll die. And her cubs with her." Nathan was already reaching for his field pack. "I've delivered thousands of calves, dozens of zoo animals in distress. The principles are the same. This isn't a zoo, Nathan. These are wild lions. Then stay here. Keep an eye on Jabari. If he charges, fire a warning shot." Nathan handed her the flare gun from his pack. "I'm going to help her." "This is insane," Emily protested, but she took the flare gun. "At least wait until Jabari leaves." "He won't leave her. Not now." Nathan's expression softened. "That's what mates do. They stay." Something in his tone made Emily look at him sharply, but Nathan had already started his careful approach, moving slowly and deliberately. He kept his body language non-threatening, avoiding direct eye contact with Jabari, who had instantly noticed his presence. The male lion stiffened, his mane seeming to expand as he positioned himself between the approaching human and his mate. A low, warning growl rumbled across the distance. "Easy, big fellow," Nathan murmured, though he knew the lion couldn't understand his words. "I'm just here to help." Jabari took a threatening step forward, then paused as a pitiful moan came from the cave behind him. He turned, momentarily distracted by Makina's distress, then back to the approaching threat, clearly torn. Nathan used that moment of indecision to move closer, now just 30 yards from the cave. He could see Makina more clearly now, her sides heaving with effort, her eyes glazed with exhaustion, classic signs of a birthing gone wrong. Jabari growled again, more menacingly, taking another step toward Nathan. Behind him, Makina made another sound, this one different, almost like a plea, and then something extraordinary happened. Jabari looked back at his mate, then at Nathan, then deliberately moved to the side of the cave entrance. Not leaving, but not blocking access either. "My God," Emily whispered from behind Nathan. She had followed despite her protests. "I've never seen anything like that." "He knows she needs help," Nathan said, still moving forward with careful steps. "Animals are smarter than we give them credit for." When he was 15 yards away, Nathan knelt slowly, setting his bag on the ground. Jabari watched his every move, tense but not attacking. The lion's amber eyes held a wild intelligence that seemed to be making calculated decisions with every passing second. "I'm going to approach her now," Nathan said to Emily without looking back. "Keep your eyes on Jabari. If he charges, fire the flare high. It might startle him enough to give me time to retreat." "Nathan, please reconsider." "No time." "She's fading." He could see it in the lioness's posture, in the weakening rise and fall of her sides. With slow, deliberate movements, Nathan approached the cave entrance. Jabari paced nearby, growling continuously but not interfering. When Nathan was just outside the small cave, he knelt again, allowing Makina to see him clearly, to smell his scent. The lioness's eyes, clouded with pain, fixed on him. There was fear there, but also something else, a desperate awareness that transcended species. She was dying, and somehow she knew it. "I'm going to help you," Nathan said softly. "I promise." He reached slowly into his bag, retrieving a pair of long obstetrical gloves. As he pulled them on, a flicker of movement in the distance caught his attention. The gray jeep had appeared on the horizon, stopping at the crest of a small hill overlooking their position. "Emily," Nathan called quietly. "We've got company." She turned, spotting the vehicle. "It's him again." "The same jeep. Keep an eye on both threats," Nathan instructed, turning his attention back to Makina. "I'm going in." Heart pounding, partly from the danger, partly from his condition, Nathan crawled the last few feet into the shallow cave. Makina made no move to stop him, her energy clearly depleted from hours or even days of unproductive labor. Up close, the situation was worse than he'd feared. Makina was severely dehydrated, her gums pale, her breathing shallow. Nathan could see that a cub was partially presented but stuck in the birth canal, a classic dystocia scenario that would be challenging even in a controlled veterinary setting. "Emily," he called, "I need the emergency medical kit from my bag, and water. Bring the canteen." He heard her approaching cautiously behind him, Jabari's growls intensifying at the presence of a second human near his vulnerable mate. "How bad is it?" Emily asked, handing him the supplies. "Bad. She's been in labor at least a day, probably longer. The cub is breech and stuck. I need to reposition it and help her deliver, or they both die." Nathan worked with the focused precision of decades of veterinary experience, his hands gentle but certain as he tried to help the exhausted lioness. He spoke continuously in a low, soothing voice, not because Makina understood his words, but because the tone itself conveyed calm and reassurance. "Steady, girl. That's it. Just a little more." Outside the cave, Jabari paced anxiously, occasionally approaching the entrance only to back away again, torn between protective instinct and recognition of his mate's desperate situation. "The jeep is moving closer," Emily reported tensely from the cave entrance, dividing her attention between the approaching vehicle and the agitated male lion. "Whoever it is, they've been watching the pride," Nathan replied without looking up from his work. "They know Makina is vulnerable. Poachers wouldn't approach openly in daylight, unless they're desperate, or not just poachers." Nathan's hands stilled momentarily as a thought occurred to him. What if it's a trophy hunter? Someone with a permit for lion, but hunting outside their assigned zone? Emily's expression darkened. That would explain the snares. Trying to capture rather than kill. A live lion brings a higher price for certain hunting operations. Nathan returned his focus to Makina, who gave a sudden, stronger push as he managed to reposition the cub. "That's it, girl. You're doing great." His heart gave a painful twinge, reminding him of his own precarious situation. The stress, the heat, the exertion, all dangerous for someone with his condition. Nathan pushed the thought aside, one life at a time. The jeep had stopped about 100 yards away. Through the cave entrance, Nathan could see a man exit the vehicle, rifle in hand. "Emily," he said quietly. "If that's who I think it is, we may have a bigger problem than Jabari." "Who?" She turned to look more carefully at the approaching figure. Nathan didn't answer immediately, his attention drawn back to Makina as she gave another push. This time, progress. The cub moved, its tiny form beginning to emerge properly. "Almost there," he encouraged the lioness. "One more push." Outside, the stranger was walking steadily toward them, rifle held ready but not aimed. Jabari had noticed the new arrival and was now facing this fresh threat, his body low in a pre-charge posture. "Nathan," Emily said urgently, "we need to do something. If Jabari charges that man, he'll shoot." "Then stop him. Take the flare gun. Fire a warning. Do something." Nathan couldn't leave Makina now, not when they were so close. Emily hesitated only a moment before grabbing the flare gun and exiting the cave. Nathan heard her shouting at the approaching man to stop, to lower his weapon. The man's response was lost in the sudden, triumphant roar from Jabari as Makina gave a final, massive push. A tiny, wet cub slid into Nathan's waiting hands, followed immediately by a second that he hadn't even realized was there. Twins. Both alive. Both perfectly formed despite their difficult entry into the world. Nathan worked quickly to clear their airways, stimulating their tiny bodies as he would any newborn mammal. They responded with weak, mewling sounds that grew stronger by the second. Outside he could hear raised voices. Emily and the stranger engaged in some kind of confrontation. "You've done it, Makina," Nathan told the exhausted lioness, placing the cubs near her head where she could see and smell them. Two beautiful cubs. Makina's tongue extended weakly, licking one of the cubs. Nathan knew he should leave now, give the new mother space to bond with her babies. But there was one more critical task. He needed to give her fluids and antibiotics to help her recover from the traumatic birth. As he prepared the injection, a shadow fell across the cave entrance. Nathan looked up, expecting to see Emily. Instead, the stranger stood there, rifle lowered but ready. "Step away from the lion, Dad," the man said. The voice hit Nathan like a physical blow. Despite 15 years of separation, despite the weathered face and new scars, he would know that voice anywhere. Michael. Time seemed to freeze in the stifling heat of the African afternoon. Nathan stared at the man framed in the cave entrance, unable to reconcile the stranger before him with the boy he remembered. Michael was leaner, harder, his face weathered by sun and experience, a thin scar running along his jawline that hadn't been there 15 years ago. "What are you doing here?" Nathan finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I could ask you the same thing." Michael's eyes flicked to the lioness and newborn cubs, then back to his father. "Dr. Hammerson called me, told me about your condition. Said you'd taken off to Africa with 6 months to live." His jaw tightened. "Had to hear it from your doctor, not my father." Behind Michael, Emily stood with confusion etched across her face, the flare gun still in her hand. "Nathan, you know this man?" "He's my son," Nathan replied, the words feeling strange in his mouth after so many years of silence. Michael's rifle remained at the ready, though not aimed directly at anyone. "You need to step away from the lions, Dad. This isn't safe. I can't leave yet. She needs antibiotics and fluids." Nathan turned back to Makina, who was weakly licking her cubs, her amber eyes occasionally darting to the humans with wary exhaustion. "She just had a difficult birth. If I don't treat her now, she could die from infection or blood loss." "That's nature," Michael said, echoing Emily's earlier sentiment, though his voice lacked conviction. "Is that what they taught you in the military? To stand by and watch suffering when you could prevent it?" The moment the words left his mouth, Nathan regretted them. 15 years of silence, and the first real conversation with his son was already veering into dangerous territory. Michael's expression hardened. "You don't know the first thing about what I learned in the military." "Stop," Emily interjected, stepping forward. "Whatever is happening between you two needs to wait. We have more immediate problems." She nodded toward the savannah beyond the cave, where Jabari had resumed his agitated pacing, his attention now divided between the humans in the cave and something in the distance. Nathan followed her gaze. Dark clouds were building on the horizon, not the promising rain clouds they had been hoping for, but the ominous wall of a dust storm. The drought-parched Serengeti was about to be hit by one of the most dangerous weather phenomena in East Africa. "Haboob," Emily said grimly. "A big one, moving fast. We have maybe 30 minutes before it hits." Nathan's heart sank. The approaching storm would make it impossible to safely transport Makina and her cubs to the research center, but leaving them here, weak and exposed, wasn't an option either. "We need to stabilize her here," Nathan decided. "Give her the medications, make sure the cubs are nursing, then take shelter ourselves until the storm passes. In case you haven't noticed, Dad, we're in the middle of nowhere with a dust storm approaching and an agitated male lion who could decide we're a threat at any moment." Michael's voice was tight with frustration. "We need to leave. Now." "I'm not abandoning her." Nathan turned back to his medical supplies, drawing up antibiotics with practiced efficiency despite his trembling hands, a combination of adrenaline, emotion, and his worsening heart condition. "Damn it, Dad." "Michael." Nathan's voice was quiet but firm. "I spent 15 years regretting putting my work before my family. I won't spend what little time I have left regretting putting my pride before doing what's right. Now, either help me or leave, but I'm finishing this." A tense silence filled the cave. Then, To Nathan's surprise, Michael set his rifle against the cave wall and knelt beside his father. "What do you need me to do?" he asked gruffly. "Hold her head still while I give the injection." Nathan handed Michael a thick cloth. "Cover her eyes to keep her calm. Emily, watch Jabari and the storm. If either gets too close, we need to know." They worked together in tense silence, father and son side by side for the first time in a decade and a half. Nathan administered the antibiotics, then helped position the weakened cubs to nurse. The moment the first cub latched successfully, a visible change came over McKenna. Her body relaxed slightly, maternal instincts overriding her pain and fear. "She's going to be okay," Nathan said, more to himself than the others. "They all are." "We might not be," Emily called from the cave entrance. "The storm's moving faster than I thought. We have maybe 15 minutes, and we're too far from the vehicles to make it back in time." "My Jeep is closer," Michael said. "But we'd still be cutting it close." Nathan looked at McKenna and her cubs, then at the approaching wall of dust visible through the cave entrance. "We can't leave them exposed. This cave isn't deep enough to provide adequate protection." "What are you suggesting?" Emily asked. "We can't move her." Nathan's mind raced, evaluating options, calculating risks. "We shore up this cave entrance. Create a windbreak with whatever we have, tarps, jackets, the emergency blankets from our packs." "That's insane," Michael protested. "We need to get to shelter ourselves." "Your Jeep isn't shelter from a haboob," Nathan countered. "Our best option is to improve this cave and stay put. All of us." He looked his son in the eye. "Including you." The approaching storm had cast an eerie golden glow over the landscape. Jabari sensed the danger, his pacing becoming more agitated. Suddenly, he entered the cave, causing all 3 humans to freeze. The massive lion regarded them warily but seemed to recognize that the greater threat was outside. He moved past them to McKenna's side, positioning his body between her and the cave entrance, a living shield for his mate and newborn cubs. "I've never," Emily breathed, her scientific detachment momentarily shattered by the raw display of protective instinct. "We need to work fast," Nathan said, breaking the spell. "Michael, help me with the tarps for my pack. Emily, gather rocks to secure the edges." They sprang into action, driven by the rapidly approaching storm. Using the emergency tarps from their field packs and secured with rocks, they created a makeshift barrier across most of the cave entrance, leaving just enough space for air to circulate. "It won't keep everything out, but it should deflect the worst of it," Nathan said, surveying their work. The wind was picking up dramatically, whistling across the savanna and bending the tall grasses almost to the ground. In the distance, animals were running, seeking shelter from the approaching wall of dust that now loomed menacingly on the horizon, a towering brown cloud that seemed to devour the landscape. "Get inside, behind the tarp," Nathan ordered as the first tendrils of dust began to swirl around them. "Cover your mouth and nose with cloth." They retreated into the cave, huddling against the far wall, giving the lions as much space as possible in the confined area. Jabari watched them warily but made no aggressive moves, his primary concern clearly the protection of McKenna and the cubs. "How long will it last?" Michael asked, wrapping a bandana around the lower half of his face. "Could be 20 minutes, could be 2 hours, Emily replied. "Impossible to predict." The storm hit with sudden, overwhelming force. The tarp billowed inward but held, though fine dust immediately began filtering through the smallest gaps and around the edges. The world outside disappeared, replaced by a howling brown void that reduced visibility to 0. Inside the cave, the temperature dropped as the sun was blotted out by the dust cloud. The 3 humans pressed themselves against the wall, eyes stinging despite their protective coverings. Jabari maintained his vigilant position by McKenna, his massive body shielding her and the cubs from both the encroaching dust and the strange humans. Some vacation, huh, Dad? Michael's attempt at humor was muffled by his bandana. Nathan felt a surprising laugh bubble up. Your mother always wanted adventure. Is that why you came? For Mom? The simple question carried 15 years of unspoken pain. Nathan took a deep breath, tasting dust despite his covering. Partly, he admitted. We always said we'd come together when I retired. Then the cancer took her before we could. He paused, considering how much to reveal. But I also came because I didn't want to die in a hospital bed. 6 months doesn't sound like much, but it's enough time to make some things right. Michael was silent for a long moment, the only sound the howling wind and the occasional rumble from Jabari. You could have called me, he finally said. Told me yourself about the diagnosis. Would you have answered? Another heavy silence. I don't know, Michael admitted. But you should have tried. Nathan felt an old, familiar frustration rise up. Just like you could have called when your mother was dying. She asked for you, Michael. Every day. I didn't know she was that bad. Michael's voice cracked slightly. The last time I called, you said she was responding to treatment. She was, then she wasn't. Things changed fast at the end. Nathan closed his eyes, remembering those final, terrible days. I tried to reach you. Your number was disconnected. I was deployed. Classified location. Michael shifted uncomfortably. By the time I got the messages, she was gone. The storm raged outside, mirroring the turbulent emotions within the cave. Emily, clearly uncomfortable witnessing such a personal conversation, had edged away to give them privacy, focusing her attention on the lions instead. I didn't come to Tanzania to track you, Dad, Michael said after a long pause. Not initially. I've been working private security for wildlife reserves, tracking poachers, training rangers. When Dr. Hammerson called, I was already in Kenya. It seemed like, I don't know, fate, maybe. Nathan absorbed this information, seeing his son in a new light. So the rifle, the surveillance, you were tracking poachers, not lions. Both, actually. This pride has been targeted repeatedly. High-value animals for the illegal wildlife trade. I've been trying to identify the smuggling network. A piece clicked into place in Nathan's mind. The snares we found, professional grade. Not local poachers hunting for food. Michael nodded. There's a big operation moving through this region. They specifically target pregnant females or those with cubs. They can sell the cubs to private collectors and the adults to certain hunting operations. The revelation made Nathan's blood run cold. He looked at Makina and her tiny cubs with new understanding of the danger they faced. A danger that wouldn't end when the storm passed. The wind suddenly intensified, a powerful gust partially tearing the tarp from its moorings. Dust poured in, choking and blinding. Michael lunged forward, grabbing for the flapping edge. As he secured it, his shirt rode up, revealing a nasty scar across his lower back, one Nathan had never seen before. When Michael returned to his position, Nathan couldn't help asking, "The scar, what happened?" Michael's hand unconsciously moved to his back. "Afghanistan. 6 years ago. IED. He shrugged as if it were nothing. I got lucky. The guys behind me didn't. Nathan felt the weight of all he'd missed. His son's adult life, his experiences, his pain. 15 years of silence, of stubbornness on both sides. And now, with his heart failing, there might not be enough time left to bridge that gap. As if reading his thoughts, his heart gave a painful lurch. Nathan winced, pressing a hand to his chest. The action didn't go unnoticed by Michael. You okay? Concern broke through his carefully maintained distance. Fine. Just the dust. but Nathan was already reaching for his pill bottle, his movements betraying the lie. Michael watched him closely. How bad is it really? The heart condition. Nathan swallowed the nitroglycerin tablet dry, waiting for it to ease the tightening in his chest. Bad enough. Cardiomyopathy, advanced stage. The muscles too damaged for surgery to help. He attempted a smile. Hence the 6-month vacation. Better than sitting around waiting for the inevitable. And this? Michael gestured to the cave, the lions, the storm. Is this how you plan to spend your remaining time? Risking what little you have left for a wild animal? Before Nathan could answer, Emily interrupted. Something's happening. She was watching Makina intently. I think she's bleeding too much. Nathan immediately shifted his focus to the lioness, medical instincts overriding personal concerns. Moving carefully past Jabari, who growled a warning but didn't attack, Nathan examined Makina. Emily was right. The discharge beneath the lioness was heavier than it should be, even after a difficult birth. Postpartum hemorrhage, he said grimly. I need my medical kit. Emily passed it to him, and Nathan quickly prepared another injection, oxytocin, to help the uterus contract and stop the bleeding. As he approached Makina with the syringe, Jabari's growls intensified, the male lion clearly at the limit of his tolerance for human proximity. Easy, big guy, Nathan murmured. Just one more time, then we'll leave her alone. Whether it was his tone or some deeper understanding, Jabari didn't interfere as Nathan administered the injection. Makina barely reacted, her energy focused entirely on her nursing cubs. That should help, Nathan said, retreating to give the lions space. Now we wait. The storm continued to rage outside, though the worst of its fury seemed to be passing. Fine dust hung in the air of the cave like mist, coating everything with a thin layer of grit. Through it all, Jabari maintained his protective position, occasionally shaking his magnificent mane to dislodge the accumulating dust. Why did you really come to Africa, Dad? Michael asked suddenly. The truth. Nathan considered deflecting, but found he lacked the energy for anything but honesty. To say goodbye? To fulfill a promise to your mother? To find some meaning in whatever time I have left? He looked at his son directly. And maybe, somewhere deep down, I hoped I might find a way to reach you before it was too late. Michael held his gaze for a long moment, then looked away. You always were stubborn. Wonder where you got it from. Nathan smiled faintly. The storm's howl had diminished to a moaning wind. The worst of it passed. Emily cautiously approached the tarp barrier and peered out. Visibility's still poor, but it's improving. We should be able to leave in about 30 minutes. We can't just leave them, Nathan said, nodding toward Makina and her cubs. Not with poachers actively targeting them. We don't have much choice, Emily replied. We can't relocate a lioness with newborn cubs, and we certainly can't stay here indefinitely. Then we bring help to them. Nathan turned to Michael. You said you work security for reserves. Can you get a team out here? Set up monitoring? Michael considered this. Possibly. I have contacts with the anti-poaching units. If we can prove there's an active threat, they might establish a temporary observation post. The snares we collected should be evidence enough, Emily added, and I can request additional camera traps from the research center. Outside, the landscape was gradually re-emerging as the dust settled, though a fine brown haze still hung in the air. The storm had scoured the savannah, leaving behind a transformed world where tracks and scents had been erased, disorienting for both predator and prey. Nathan moved to check on Makina one final time. The oxytocin appeared to be working. The bleeding had slowed significantly. The cubs were nursing vigorously, their tiny bodies already stronger than just hours before. Makina's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Nathan felt a connection that transcended species, a recognition between two beings who had faced death and emerged on the other side. "They're going to be okay," he said softly. "All three of them." As he turned away, his heart suddenly seized with a pain far more intense than before. Nathan gasped, clutching his chest as his knees buckled beneath him. The cave spun around him, faces blurring as he collapsed to the dusty floor. "Dad!" Michael's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Dad, stay with me!" Nathan tried to respond, but his voice wouldn't cooperate. The pain was overwhelming now, radiating down his left arm and up into his jaw, classic signs of a heart attack that the veterinarian in him recognized clinically even as he experienced it personally. Hands turned him onto his back. Emily's face appeared above him, then Michael's, both wearing expressions of alarm. Behind them, improbably, was Jabari, the lion's massive head visible as he watched the commotion with alert curiosity. "Nitro!" Nathan managed to gasp. "Pocket!" Michael frantically searched his father's pocket, finding the pill bottle. "It's empty!" His voice cracked with panic. "The bottle's empty!" Nathan closed his eyes. So this was how it would end, not in a sterile hospital room as he'd feared, but in the African wilderness he and Abby had dreamed of, with his estranged son by his side, and in the company of the wild creatures he'd spent his life caring for. There was a certain poetry to it. "Dad, don't you dare!" Michael's voice broke through the encroaching darkness. "We didn't come all this way to lose you in a cave in Africa." Nathan felt pressure on his chest. CPR, he realized distantly. Michael remembered his training. Good. But it wouldn't matter. The damaged heart muscle had finally given out, just as the doctors had predicted. 6 months had been optimistic after all. As consciousness began to slip away, Nathan thought he heard Abby's voice calling to him. But strangely, she wasn't saying goodbye. She was telling him to fight, to stay, that it wasn't his time yet. The last thing Nathan Wright saw before darkness claimed him was the face of his son, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on his cheeks, mouth moving in desperate pleas that Nathan could no longer hear. Darkness swirled around Nathan, punctuated by brief, disorienting flashes of awareness. Voices filtered through the haze, urgent and distorted. Michael's face contorted with fear. Emily shouting into a radio, the rhythmic pressure on his chest, the taste of dust in his mouth, and strangely, the rumbling growl of a lion that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath him. Then nothing. When consciousness returned, it came slowly, like dawn breaking over the Serengeti. First sound, a steady electronic beeping, then sensation, crisp sheets, the pinch of an IV in his arm. Finally, sight, as Nathan's eyes fluttered open to a white ceiling and fluorescent lights. Hospital, not the afterlife. "He's awake," a woman's voice said. Not Emily's, someone with a Tanzanian accent. A face appeared above him, a nurse with kind eyes above her surgical mask. "Dr. Wright, can you hear me?" Nathan tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He managed a weak nod instead. "I'll get the doctor," she said, disappearing from his field of vision. Nathan struggled to piece together what had happened, how he had gone from dying in a cave in the Serengeti to a hospital bed. His memories were fragmented, dreamlike. Had any of it been real? Makina, the cubs, the dust storm, Michael? "Dad." The voice came from his right, tentative and hoarse with exhaustion. Nathan turned his head with effort. Michael sat in a chair beside the bed, unshaven, clothes rumpled, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Real, then, not a hallucination. "Michael," Nathan whispered, his voice a raspy shadow of itself. His son leaned forward, relief washing over his face. "You scared the hell out of us, old man." "What happened?" Michael ran a hand over his stubbled jaw. You had a massive heart attack. Went into cardiac arrest in that cave. Emily and I performed CPR while we waited for the emergency helicopter. His voice caught. It was touch and go for a while. The doctors, they didn't think you'd make it through the first night? Nathan absorbed this information slowly. How long? You've been unconscious for 3 days. We're in Arusha. It was the closest hospital with a cardiac unit. 3 days. Nathan tried to process this, but his thoughts were sluggish, clouded by medication and fatigue. A more pressing question pushed to the forefront of his mind. McKenna? The Cubs? A small smile touched Michael's lips. Alive. All 3 of them. Emily's been sending updates. The research center set up a temporary observation post near the den. The anti-poaching unit is patrolling the area. Relief flooded through Nathan, stronger than he would have expected. He had done what he came to do, fulfilled his promise to Abby to see Africa, reconnected with his son, and perhaps most unexpectedly, saved a family of lions who had somehow saved him in return. The doctors are calling it a miracle, Michael continued. They don't understand how you survived. The damage to your heart was extensive. By all medical logic, you should have died in that cave. Nathan remembered the darkness, Abby's voice urging him to fight. Maybe I had help, he murmured. Before Michael could ask what he meant, the door opened, and a doctor entered, a tall Tanzanian man with glasses and a serious expression that softened when he saw Nathan awake. Dr. Wright? Welcome back. I'm Dr. Kimathi. He approached the bed, checking the monitors. You've given us quite a challenge these past few days. Sorry about that, Nathan replied weakly. No apologies necessary, though I am curious what a man with your cardiac history was doing in the middle of the Serengeti during a haboob. The doctor's tone was gently chiding, particularly one who left his emergency medication behind. Nathan managed a faint smile. Long story. I imagine so, and one that will have to wait until you're stronger. Doctor. Kimathi made notes on a tablet. You've suffered a major cardiac event, Dr. Wright. The fact that you're alive is remarkable, but you're not out of danger. We've stabilized you, but the underlying condition remains. What's the prognosis? Nathan asked, falling back on the clinical language of his own medical training. Dr. Kimathi's expression grew more serious. Without intervention, perhaps a month? Maybe less. Nathan felt Michael tense beside him, but wasn't surprised himself. He'd known the odds when he left Montana. There is, however, another option, the doctor continued. You're a potential candidate for a heart transplant. This did surprise Nathan. At my age? You're otherwise healthy, and medical tourism for organ transplants is not uncommon in this region for those who can afford it. Given your condition, you would be high on the priority list. Dr. Kimathi glanced at Michael. Your son has already begun making inquiries. Nathan turned to Michael, who met his gaze steadily. I'm not ready to lose you again, Dad. Not when we've just found each other. The emotion in his son's voice pierced Nathan more deeply than the heart attack had. For 15 years he had carried the weight of their estrangement, the pain of knowing he had put his veterinary practice above his family until it was too late. Now, improbably, he was being offered a second chance, not just at life, but at rebuilding what had been broken. I'll consider it, Nathan said finally, but I need time to think. Dr. Kimathi nodded. Of course. Rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger. After the doctor left, silence filled the room. Nathan studied his son's face, seeing the boy he remembered beneath the weathered exterior of the man before him. You don't have to stay, he said finally. I know you have responsibilities. I'm exactly where I need to be, Michael replied. Rachel is with her mother. My team knows where to find me. Rachel? Michael's expression softened. My daughter. Your granddaughter. She's 9. Smart as a whip, stubborn as her grandfather. He reached for his phone, pulling up a photo of a girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding a science fair ribbon. She has Abby's eyes, Nathan whispered, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Yeah, she does. Michael put the phone away. She's been asking about you. Ever since she found out she had a grandfather who's a veterinarian. She loves animals. I'd like to meet her, Nathan said, the words feeling inadequate for the surge of longing that accompanied them. You will. Michael's tone left no room for doubt. Which is why you're going to take the transplant if a donor becomes available. No more of this, I've made my peace with dying nonsense. Nathan smiled faintly. When did you become so bossy? Must have learned it from my father. The easy banter between them felt like a miracle in itself, as unlikely as his survival. But beneath it lay the unresolved pain of 15 years of silence, the hurt that couldn't be erased by a few days of crisis-induced reconciliation. I'm sorry, Michael, Nathan said suddenly, his voice cracking. For everything. For being so damn stubborn, for missing your mother's funeral, for not being the father you deserved. Michael's expression tightened, the casual facade slipping to reveal the raw emotions beneath. I was angry for a long time, angry that you always put your practice first, angry that you pushed me toward veterinary school when I wanted something different, angry that I wasn't there when Mom died. He took a shuddering breath. But watching you in that cave, with those lions, I finally understood. Understood what? That it was never about the animals over us. It was about helping, healing. It's who you are. Michael looked down at his hands. The same reason I joined the military, then went into conservation security. I wanted to protect, to make a difference. We're not so different after all. The revelation hung between them, a bridge across the chasm of years. Nathan felt tears burning behind his eyes. Your mother always said that we were too alike to get along. She was usually right, Michael said with a sad smile. The door opened again, and Emily Parker entered carrying a small duffel bag. She stopped short when she saw Nathan awake. You're back, she said, relief evident in her voice. Thank God. So they tell me, Nathan replied. Michael says you've been keeping an eye on our lions. Emily nodded, setting down the bag. The research center has established a temporary field station near the den site. McKenna and the cubs are doing well. Jabari has been bringing them food regularly. She paused, a hint of professional excitement breaking through her concern. We've observed some unusual behaviors. Jabari seems to be patrolling a specific pattern around the den, almost as if he's recreating our scent trail from that day. Lions have excellent spatial memory, Nathan said. He's probably identifying our scents as non-threatening now, incorporating them into his mental map of safe versus dangerous. That's what I thought too, Emily agreed. But there's something else. Something I wouldn't believe if I hadn't seen it myself. She pulled out her tablet, queuing up a video. This was yesterday morning. The footage showed McKenna outside the den, looking remarkably recovered. The cubs tumbled at her feet, already noticeably larger than when Nathan had delivered them. As they watched, McKenna suddenly lifted her head, staring directly at the camera. Then, in a behavior completely counter to wild lion instincts, she picked up one of the cubs by the scruff and carried it deliberately toward the camera, setting it down in clear view before retreating a short distance. She's showing us the cub, Emily said, the wonder evident in her voice. Deliberately. I've never seen behavior like this in wild lions. It's as if she wants us to see that they're thriving. Nathan felt a strange tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his heart condition. Have you named them? The cubs? Emily smiled. The team is calling them Nathan and Abby. The simple statement hit Nathan with unexpected force. Tears he had been holding back spilled over, running down his weathered cheeks. In his nearly 7 decades of life, through all his work with animals, he had never experienced anything like this connection, this wordless understanding between species, this recognition of shared struggle and survival. "I need to see them again," he said, the words emerging before he could consider their implications. "Dad, you just had a heart attack," Michael protested. "You're not going anywhere near the Serengeti for a long time." "Your son is right," Emily agreed. "But don't worry, we'll keep monitoring them. And when you're stronger, maybe we can arrange a viewing from one of the safer observation posts." Nathan nodded, though a part of him doubted he would ever be strong enough to return to the field. The transplant was a long shot at best, and even if successful, his days of trekking through the African wilderness were likely over. As if reading his thoughts, Michael leaned forward. "One step at a time, Dad. First, you get stronger. Then we talk about the transplant. Africa isn't going anywhere." Nathan managed a weak smile. "When did you get so wise?" "Must have learned it from my father," Michael replied, echoing his earlier words. That night, after Michael and Emily had gone to find food and accommodation, Nathan lay alone in his hospital room, watching the Tanzanian sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and gold beyond his window. He thought of Abby, of the dreams they had shared, of the life they had built together, and of the son who had found his way back against all odds. He thought of Makina and her cubs, of Jabari's protective vigilance, of the strange bond forged in a dusty cave during a moment of shared vulnerability. Had he traveled all this way, risked what little remained of his life just to save a family of lions? Or had they, in their wild, instinctual wisdom, somehow saved him? As darkness fell over Arusha, Nathan Wright made his decision. If a donor heart became available, he would take it, not because he feared death, he had made his peace with that months ago, but because he had found something worth living for, a son to reconnect with, a granddaughter to meet. And somewhere in the vast Serengeti, a family of lions who had, against all logic and expectation, recognized in him a kindred spirit. His own heart might be failing, but in ways that mattered more than muscle and blood, it had never been stronger. 2 weeks passed in the Arusha hospital, days marked by the slow rhythm of recovery, medical tests, and increasingly lengthy conversations between father and son. Nathan grew stronger incrementally, defying his doctor's expectations, but still fundamentally fragile. The damaged heart in his chest remained a ticking clock that no amount of medication could permanently silence. The hospital room had accumulated personal touches, a framed photo of Rachel that Michael had arranged to have sent from the States, a small wooden carving of a lion that Emily had brought from a local market, and most poignantly, Abby's urn, which Michael had retrieved from Nathan's cabin at the research center. "Your mom always did like a room with a view," Nathan remarked one morning, nodding toward the urn on the windowsill that framed the distant peak of Mount Meru. Michael, who had been reviewing donor registry updates on his laptop, looked up with a small smile. "She would have loved this place. Not the hospital part," Nathan amended, "but Africa, the vastness of it, the life." He shifted in his bed, wincing slightly at the persistent ache in his chest. "I keep thinking about Makina and the cubs. Any updates from Emily?" This had become their daily ritual, Michael sharing news from the research center where Emily continued to document the remarkable behavior of the lion family that had so unexpectedly entwined with their own. "Actually, yes." Michael set aside his laptop and pulled out his phone. "She sent this last night." He queued up a video that showed Makina and her cubs, now noticeably larger at 3 weeks old, playing near the den entrance. The cub's eyes were bright and alert, their movements growing more coordinated each day. Jabari lounged nearby, his massive frame relaxed but vigilant. "They're thriving," Nathan observed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "The male cub, the one they're calling Nathan, he's going to be big like his father. Emily says he's the more adventurous of the two. Little Abby is more cautious, but apparently quite clever at stalking games." Michael pocketed his phone. "The research team is fascinated by how comfortable they all seem with human presence, especially considering they're completely wild lions." "Not completely wild," Nathan mused. "Not anymore. They've been changed by their interaction with us, just as we've been changed by them." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Kimathi entered, accompanied by a woman in a business suit whom Nathan didn't recognize. "Dr. Wright, how are you feeling today?" Kimathi asked, checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. "Ready to trade these four walls for the open savanna?" Nathan replied with a wry smile. "Not quite yet, I'm afraid," the doctor said, "but I do have news that might accelerate your timeline." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Ms. Odera from the East African Transplant Network." Michael stood abruptly, hope and tension radiating from him. "You've found a donor?" Ms. Odera nodded, her expression professionally compassionate. "Potentially. A compatible heart has become available in Nairobi. Given Dr. Wright's condition and status, he's been placed at the top of the regional recipient list." The words hung in the room like a physical presence. Nathan had known this possibility existed, had even agreed to be listed, but facing the reality of it, the imminent prospect of receiving another person's heart, was overwhelming. "What's the timeline?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "If you consent, we would airlift you to Nairobi this afternoon. The transplant team is prepared to operate tonight." Ms. Odera placed a folder on the bedside table. "These are the consent forms and information about the procedure, risks, and recovery process." "So soon," Nathan murmured, more to himself than the others. Dr. Kimathi stepped closer to the bed. "This is an extraordinary opportunity, Dr. Wright. Hearts matching your blood type and tissue profile don't become available often, especially not in this region." "Who is the donor?" Michael asked. Miss Odera's expression softened slightly. "A 34-year-old Kenyan man, a teacher. He suffered a fatal brain aneurysm yesterday. His family has consented to organ donation." A teacher, not so different from Abby. The parallel wasn't lost on Nathan. "I'll give you some time to discuss and review the materials," Ms. Odera said, moving toward the door. "But we'll need your decision within the hour to make the necessary arrangements." After she and Dr. Kimathi left, a heavy silence fell over the room. Michael picked up the folder but didn't open it, instead watching his father's face carefully. "You're having second thoughts," he said. It wasn't a question. Nathan sighed, looking toward the window where Abby's urn caught the morning light. "Not second thoughts exactly, just trying to reconcile everything." He met his son's gaze. 6 months ago, I was making peace with dying, planning my exit. Now I'm contemplating taking someone else's heart to extend a life I had already mentally concluded. That's what organ donation is, Dad. That teacher chose to give this gift. His family chose to honor his wishes." Michael's voice was gentle but insistent. "And you still have things to do here." "Do I?" The question wasn't rhetorical. "What exactly am I living for, Michael? I'm almost 70. My practice is sold. My wife is gone." He gestured to his weakened body. "Even if the transplant is successful, I'll never be the man I was." "You'll be Rachel's grandfather," Michael said simply. "You'll be my father. Isn't that enough?" The raw honesty in his son's voice cut through Nathan's philosophical detachment. After 15 years of estrangement, after all the missed birthdays and holidays and milestones, his son was fighting for him to stay. Before Nathan could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming video call. Emily's name flashed on the screen. Michael answered it, angling the phone so Nathan could see. Emily's face appeared, wind-blown and sun-bronzed from days in the field. "Nathan, how are you feeling?" Her voice crackled slightly through the connection. "Better every day," he replied, the practiced response he gave to all well-wishers. "How are our lions?" Emily's expression shifted to one of barely contained excitement. "That's actually why I'm calling. Something extraordinary happened this morning. I've never seen anything like it in all my years studying wildlife." She adjusted her camera, and the view shifted to show the landscape beyond, the familiar dry riverbed area where Makina had made her den. "We've been maintaining the observation post about 100 yards from the den site, documenting the cubs' development," Emily explained in voiceover. "This morning, Jabari started behaving strangely, pacing, looking toward our position, then back to the den. Then this happened." The video showed Jabari approaching Makena at the den entrance. Some form of communication seemed to pass between the lions. Subtle body language Nathan could interpret even through the small screen. Then, incredibly, Makena picked up one cub while Jabari carefully took the other in his massive jaws. Together, they began walking directly toward the camera position. "They're approaching the observation post," Nathan whispered, astonished. "Wait," Emily said. It gets more remarkable. The lions stopped about 20 yards from the research team's position. Carefully, they set down the cubs, who immediately began to play in the grass. Makena sat watching them, while Jabari remained standing, his amber eyes fixed directly on the camera. "He's looking right at us," Emily narrated. "Not threatening, not retreating, just acknowledging our presence." They stayed like this for almost 30 minutes, letting us observe the cubs at close range before taking them back to the den. The video ended, returning to Emily's face. "I've consulted with colleagues worldwide. No one has documented this kind of deliberate, non-aggressive approach behavior in wild lions before. It's as if I don't know how else to say it, introducing their cubs to us." Nathan felt something shift inside him, a perspective realigning. "Or thanking us," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "That's what I thought too, Dr. Atwell from Oxford suggested it might be a form of reciprocal altruism. We helped them, now they're displaying trust as a form of repayment." She paused. "But I think it's simpler than that. I think they remember you, Nathan. I think they know what you did for them." The implications of this, the recognition of conscious gratitude in wild animals, would shake the foundations of behavioral science. But in this moment, Nathan wasn't thinking as a scientist. He was thinking as a fellow creature who had faced death and been granted reprieve. "There's more," Emily continued. "The research foundation that funds our center has taken interest in this unprecedented behavior. They're offering to establish a permanent observation and protection program for Makena's pride. They're calling it the Right Pride Initiative." Michael squeezed his father's shoulder. "Did you hear that, Dad? They're naming it after you." "After us," Nathan corrected softly. "The Wright family." After the call ended, Nathan sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the consent form still untouched on his bedside table. Finally, he reached for them. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "The transplant." Michael's relief was palpable. "What changed your mind?" Nathan looked toward Abby's urn, then back to his son. "Everything we've experienced these past weeks, finding each other again, Makena and her cubs, this second chance we've all been given, it can't be coincidence. It feels like—" He searched for words that wouldn't sound trite, like I'm being shown a different path than the one I had resigned myself to. He picked up a pen, began signing the forms with a steady hand. That teacher in Nairobi chose to give the gift of life. Who am I to refuse it? Especially when there's still work to be done. 4 hours later, a medical transport helicopter lifted off from the Arusha hospital, carrying Nathan toward Nairobi and the surgery that would determine his future. Michael followed in a chartered plane, carrying Abby's urn and the accumulated hopes of a family finding its way back together. As the helicopter rose above the East African landscape, Nathan gazed down at the vast Serengeti stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere below, a family of lions went about their day, unaware of the profound impact they had made on human lives, or perhaps, in some way science couldn't yet measure, they did know. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling the damaged heart in his chest struggle with each beat. Soon it would be replaced by another, a stranger's gift that would become part of him. The thought was both terrifying and profound. "I'm not done yet, Abby," he whispered to the rushing wind. Not quite yet. The transplant surgery lasted 9 hours. Michael waited in the hospital in Nairobi, alternating between pacing the corridors and sitting motionless in the waiting room, sometimes speaking quietly to his mother's urn as if she could intercede on Nathan's behalf. Emily called twice for updates. The research team had sent a video of the cubs playing outside the den, growing stronger and more coordinated each day, life continuing, persisting, evolving. Michael watched it on repeat during the darkest hours of the night, drawing strength from the resilience of these wild creatures who had inexplicably become part of their family story. Dawn was breaking over Nairobi when the lead surgeon finally emerged, surgical mask hanging around his neck, fatigue evident in the lines of his face. "He made it through," the doctor said simply. "The new heart is beating on its own." The words seemed too ordinary for their monumental meaning. Michael sank into a chair, overcome by emotions too complex to name. Relief, gratitude, disbelief, hope, all swirling together into a tide that threatened to pull him under. "The next 48 hours are critical," the surgeon continued. "Rejection is still a significant risk, but he's stable for now." "Can I see him?" Michael asked. "Briefly. He's heavily sedated and will remain so for at least another day." The ICU was a hushed world of soft beeping monitors and whispered conversations. Nathan lay still beneath a web of tubes and wires, his chest rising and falling with mechanically assisted breaths. He looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way Michael had never associated with his strong, stubborn father. Michael approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid too sudden a movement might disrupt the fragile new balance within Nathan's chest. He placed a hand gently on his father's arm, mindful of the IV lines. "You did it, Dad," he whispered. "Now you just need to keep fighting." As he spoke, one of the monitors captured his attention, the rhythmic spike of the heartbeat display. A new heart, a stranger's gift, now beating within his father's chest. A teacher from Nairobi living on through Nathan Wright from Montana. The interconnectedness of it all was humbling. Michael sat with his father until the nurses gently insisted he get some rest. In the hospital corridor, he called Emily with the news, then his ex-wife to speak with Rachel. The 9-year-old's excitement at the prospect of meeting her grandfather was palpable even through the phone. "Is Grandpa going to be okay now?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. "We think so, sweetheart," Michael replied, choosing honesty over false promises. "He's very tired right now, but the doctors gave him a new heart to help him get better. Like in my video game where you get an extra life?" Michael smiled despite his exhaustion. "Something like that. Can I still meet the lions when we visit? We'll see, Rachel. Grandpa needs to get much stronger first. After ending the call, Michael made his way to the small hotel across from the hospital where he had booked a room. As he collapsed onto the bed, still fully clothed, his phone buzzed with a message from Emily. It was another video, this one taken at dusk. McKenna and the cubs rested peacefully near their den. The camera panned to show the research team's camp in the distance, then back to the lions. As night fell over the Serengeti, the final frame captured Jabari sitting upright, his magnificent silhouette outlined against the darkening sky, watching over his family with unwavering vigilance. The caption read, "Some bonds transcend species. The right pride sends their strength." We're all waiting for Nathan to come home. Michael fell asleep with the phone still in his hand, the image of the watchful lion merging in his dreams with memories of his father, standing guard at his bedside during childhood illnesses, teaching him to fish in Montana streams, and now fighting to return from the threshold of death to reclaim his place in their reconstructed family. In the hospital across the street, Nathan Wright slept a healing sleep, unaware of the network of care surrounding him, from the medical team monitoring his vital signs, to his son dreaming nearby, to a family of lions on the distant savannah, to the spirit of Abby watching over them all. A new heart beat in his chest, establishing its rhythm, bearing witness to a truth as old as life itself, that healing comes in many forms, that bonds once broken can be remade stronger, and that sometimes salvation arrives from the most unexpected sources. 1 year later, the Land Rover bounced along the familiar rutted track of the Serengeti, kicking up dust that caught the golden light of late afternoon. Nathan Wright sat in the passenger seat, one hand braced against the dashboard, the other resting protectively over his chest, an unconscious gesture that had become habit since the transplant. "You okay, Dad?" Michael asked from behind the wheel, glancing sideways with the watchful concern that hadn't fully faded despite months of steady recovery. "I'm fine," Nathan replied, smiling to soften the slight irritation in his tone. After a year of cautious living, of medication schedules and cardiac rehabilitation and well-meaning hovering from his son, he was eager for this moment of return, just anxious to get there before sunset. From the back seat came a small voice, impatient with excitement. "Are we close, Daddy? Will we see the lions today?" Michael adjusted the rearview mirror to catch his daughter's eye. "We're getting close, Rachel. But remember what we talked about. We might not see them right away. Wild animals don't keep appointments." "Grandpa's lions will come," Rachel said with absolute certainty. "They're waiting for us." Nathan turned to look at his granddaughter, this bright-eyed child who had been just a photograph on a hospital nightstand a year ago and was now a living, breathing presence in his life. Rachel had her grandmother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and she had accepted Nathan into her life with the uncomplicated openness only children possess. "They're not exactly my lions, sweetheart," he corrected gently. "They're wild animals who live their own lives." Rachel simply smiled, the gap where her front teeth had been now filled with new adult teeth. "But they remember you. Emily said so." Nathan exchanged a glance with Michael, both men silently acknowledging the wisdom that sometimes came from children's unfiltered perspective. Perhaps Rachel was right. Perhaps some connections did transcend the boundaries humans tried to impose on the natural world. The Land Rover crested a small rise, and suddenly the landscape opened before them. The vast, golden expanse of the Serengeti Plains stretching toward the horizon, dotted with acacia trees and the distant shapes of grazing animals. In the year since Nathan had last seen it, the drought had broken. Seasonal rains had transformed the parched earth into a savanna, teeming with life. "There's the research center," Michael said, pointing toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. As they approached, Nathan felt a strange mingling of emotions: nostalgia, anticipation, a sense of completion. The last time he had seen this place, he'd been leaving in a medical evacuation helicopter, hovering between life and death. Now he returned with a new heart beating strongly in his chest, and the family he had once thought lost forever by his side. Emily Parker was waiting for them outside the main building, her familiar figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. As the Land Rover pulled to a stop, she stepped forward, a broad smile lighting her face. "The prodigal veterinarian returns," she said as Nathan carefully exited the vehicle. "Welcome back, Dr. Wright." They embraced briefly, the formality of their early relationship long since replaced by the bond of shared experience. "Good to see you, Emily. You're looking well." "Tanzania agrees with me," she replied, then turned to greet Michael with a warm handshake. Her eyes widened with delight when Rachel scrambled from the back seat. "And you must be Rachel. I've heard so much about you." Rachel regarded Emily with unabashed curiosity. "Are you the lion doctor?" Emily laughed. "Not exactly. I study their behavior, but your grandfather is the one who knows how to heal them." "Only that one time," Nathan demurred. "And I was a veterinarian for domestic animals, not wildlife." "Tell that to Makina," Emily replied with a meaningful look. "Come on inside. We have a lot to catch up on before tomorrow's expedition." The research center had expanded in the past year. New cabins had been built to accommodate the increased staff, and a dedicated education center now stood where once there had been only a simple gathering space. Nathan noticed a carved wooden sign over the entrance to this building, the Right Pride Initiative. "The foundation funding has made a huge difference," Emily explained, following his gaze. "We've been able to expand our research, strengthen anti-poaching measures, and develop community education programs." "All because of a viral video," Michael mused, shaking his head in wonder. After Emily's footage of Makena and Jabari's extraordinary behavior had been shared with the Research Foundation, someone had leaked it to social media. The video of wild lions seemingly introducing their cubs to the humans who had helped them had exploded across the internet, garnering millions of views within days. The story that emerged of a dying veterinarian who risked his life to save a lioness in labor only to have a heart attack and later receive a transplant had captured imaginations worldwide. Donations had poured in, not just for the research center, but also for the East African Transplant Network. Nathan's near-death experience in the service of wildlife conservation had inadvertently launched him into reluctant celebrity status and generated a wave of support for both animal protection and organ donation awareness. "Not just the video," Emily corrected. "Your story. It resonated with people across cultural and geographic boundaries. The idea that connection and compassion can exist between species, that giving and receiving help transcends our differences, people needed to hear that." Inside the main building, they settled around a large table where Emily had prepared a presentation. Rachel, initially fidgety with excitement about seeing real lions, became transfixed by the photographs and videos that documented the past year of the Right Pride's development. "The cubs are so big now," she exclaimed as Emily showed footage of the young lions, now adolescents, practicing their hunting skills under Makena's watchful eye. "They grow quickly," Emily agreed. "Little Nathan is already showing signs of a mane beginning to develop." The casual use of his name to refer to the male cub still gave Nathan a strange feeling, part pride, part humility. "And they've remained in the same territory?" Emily nodded, pulling up a map dotted with GPS tracking data. "The Pride has maintained its core territory around the original den site, though they range more widely now that the cubs are older. Jabari has successfully defended the area against 2 challenges from nomadic males." "What about poachers?" Michael asked, the security specialist in him immediately focusing on potential threats. "We've had 3 incidents in the past year," Emily admitted. But the combination of increased patrols, camera surveillance, and community engagement has been effective. Each attempt was intercepted before any animals were harmed. She clicked to the next slide, showing a striking image of Makina standing atop a rocky outcropping, surveying her domain with regal confidence. She's become an extraordinary mother. Both cubs are thriving under her guidance. "And their unusual behavior toward humans?" Nathan asked, the question that had been foremost in his mind. "Has that continued?" Emily's expression grew more animated. "That's the most fascinating aspect of our research. The cubs have developed what we're calling selective habituation. They're comfortable with the presence of our research team at specific observation points, but maintain appropriate wariness of humans in other contexts or locations." She leaned forward. "It's as if Makina and Jabari have taught them that certain humans in certain places are safe, while others are potential threats. It's a level of discriminatory learning we've never documented in wild lions before." "They're teaching their children," Nathan murmured, "the implications profound." "Exactly. And not just instinctive behaviors, but specific, context-dependent social responses." Emily's excitement was palpable. "We've published preliminary findings in the Journal of Animal Cognition, and 3 major universities have partnered with us to expand the research." As Emily continued sharing updates on the Pride and the Research Center's work, Nathan found himself drifting into reflection. A year ago, he had come to Africa expecting to die, seeking only to fulfill a promise to Abby and perhaps find some meaning in his final months. Instead, he had found renewal, not just in the transplanted heart that now beat steadily in his chest, but in the reconstructed family around this table and the unexpected connection with a family of lions who had somehow recognized in him a kindred spirit. After dinner, as Rachel was put to bed in their cabin with stories of tomorrow's adventure, Nathan stepped outside alone. The African night was alive with sounds. Distant animal calls, the rustle of wind through grass, the occasional whooping laugh of hyenas on the hunt. Above, the sky blazed with stars, more numerous and brilliant than he'd ever seen in Montana. He took out the small cedar box that had accompanied him on every step of this journey. Abby's ashes, which he had carried to Africa as a final promise kept, had taken on new significance. They were no longer just a symbol of loss, but a connection to everything that had followed. The lions, the reconciliation with Michael, meeting Rachel, the second chance at life. "I think this is where you belong, old girl," he whispered to the box, "where we both found what we were looking for." The sound of footsteps behind him made Nathan turn. Michael approached, hands in his pockets, his face half illuminated by the light spilling from the cabin window. "Rachel's finally asleep," he said, too excited about tomorrow to settle down easily. "She's a remarkable child," Nathan replied. "You've done a good job with her." Michael smiled, the compliment clearly meaningful coming from his father. "She gets a lot of her curiosity from Mom and her stubbornness from both sides of the family." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, gazing at the star-filled sky. Nathan was acutely aware of how improbable this moment was. Father and son reunited, standing beneath an African sky, a new heart beating in his chest, a new chapter unfolding for all of them. "I've been thinking," Michael said finally, "about permanent arrangements." "Oh?" Nathan kept his tone neutral, though curiosity stirred within him. "Rachel loves having you in Bozeman, but that apartment isn't really suitable for long-term." Michael shifted his weight, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've been looking at properties outside town, places with some land, maybe room for a few animals, somewhere we could all live." The implication was clear. A home for 3 generations of rights, a fresh start for their reconstructed family. Nathan felt a surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "What about your work?" he asked, buying time to compose himself. "The conservation security consulting?" "I can base operations out of Montana," Michael replied. "Travel when needed for specific projects. The team's established enough now to function with remote management." He paused. "And there's potential to develop a North American branch of the Right Initiative, applying what we've learned about human-wildlife conflict resolution to issues with wolves, bears, mountain lions." "You've given this serious thought," Nathan observed. "I have," Michael acknowledged. "After everything that's happened, life's too short for half measures, too short for living apart from the people who matter." The sentiment echoed Nathan's own journey, from a man preparing for death to one embracing a future he'd never imagined possible. "I'd like that," he said simply. "Very much." Dawn broke over the Serengeti in a spectacular display of color that had Rachel pressing her face against the Land Rover's window in wonder. They had set out early, Emily driving with practiced ease across terrain she knew intimately. The observation post near the Wright Pride's territory had been upgraded since Nathan's last visit, a small, well-camouflaged structure that allowed for close monitoring while minimizing human impact. "Remember," Emily cautioned as they approached, "there are no guarantees in wildlife observation. The Pride was in this area yesterday, but they could have moved on. We might need patience." Rachel nodded solemnly, clutching the small journal she had brought to record her observations. A gift from Nathan that had delighted her with its professional appearance, complete with "Wright Pride Research Team" embossed on the cover. They settled into the observation post, binoculars and cameras ready. Nathan felt a strange nervousness, a flutter beneath his transplanted heart that had nothing to do with his medical condition. What if the lions had moved on? What if the connection had been temporary, a product of unusual circumstances, rather than something deeper and more meaningful? An hour passed with no sign of the Pride. Rachel maintained admirable patience for a 9-year-old, carefully sketching the landscape in her journal and pestering Emily with thoughtful questions about lion behavior. Michael scanned the horizon methodically, his military training evident in his systematic approach. Nathan simply waited, feeling the African sun warm his skin, listening to the sounds of the savannah, present in a way he hadn't been during his first visit when the shadow of death had colored every experience. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Michael said suddenly, his voice low, in the tall grass near the acacia cluster. All binoculars turned in that direction. Nathan's breath caught as a familiar tawny form emerged from the grass. Makina, her distinctive facial scar visible even at this distance. She paused, lifting her head to test the wind, then continued forward with purposeful strides. "She's coming this way," Emily whispered, excitement evident in her voice despite her professional demeanor. "And she's not alone." Behind Makina, 2 adolescent lions followed, nearly adult-sized now but still showing the playfulness of youth. One was distinctly male, the beginnings of a dark mane framing his face. The other, slightly smaller and more graceful, moved with her mother's deliberate confidence. "Nathan and Abby," Rachel breathed, using the names the research team had given the cubs. "They're beautiful." The lions approached to within about 50 yards of the observation post, then settled in a patch of shade. Their behavior showed no signs of stress or wariness. They were clearly aware of the human presence but unbothered by it. "This is extraordinary," Emily murmured, documenting with her camera. "They rarely come this close to the observation post anymore. It's almost as if—" She didn't finish the thought, but Nathan understood. Almost as if they knew who was visiting today. The rational, scientific part of his mind dismissed the notion as anthropomorphic projection. But another part, the part that had held Makina's cubs in his hands while his own heart failed, the part that had heard Abby's voice urging him to fight when darkness closed in, wondered if there were connections in this world that science had yet to fully comprehend. Look! Rachel's excited whisper drew their attention to movement on the horizon. A fourth lion was approaching. Jabari, his black mane now streaked with gray, but his powerful body showing no signs of age. He moved with the confident stride of a territorial male in his prime, joining his family in the shade. For nearly an hour they observed the pride's natural behaviors. Grooming, play fighting between the adolescents, occasional communication through subtle body language. Nathan narrated quietly to Rachel, explaining what they were witnessing, while Emily recorded data and Michael maintained a watchful eye on their surroundings. Then, as the morning heat intensified, something unexpected happened. Makina rose from her resting place and began walking directly toward the observation post. The young lions followed, with Jabari bringing up the rear. "Stay very still," Emily cautioned, though the excitement in her voice betrayed her professional composure. "This is unprecedented." The lions approached to within 20 yards, close enough that Nathan could see the amber flecks in Makina's eyes, the individual whiskers on her face, the distinctive pattern of her scar tissue. She stopped, sitting upright, her gaze seeming to search the observation post until it found and fixed on Nathan. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. The rational explanation was simple. The lioness had detected a familiar scent, perhaps, or was simply curious about the structure and its occupants. But the feeling that passed through Nathan in that moment transcended rational explanation, recognition, acknowledgement, connection. "She remembers you," Rachel whispered, giving voice to what they all felt. For several minutes the tableau held, the lion family and the human family regarding each other across species boundaries that suddenly seemed permeable. Then, with a soft, chuffing sound, Makina turned and led her pride back toward the savannah. As they retreated, the young male, the cub they called Nathan, paused, looking back over his shoulder with an almost human curiosity before bounding after his family. "Well," Emily said when they had disappeared into the distance, "I think that answers the question of whether they remember." That evening, as the African sun sank toward the horizon in a blaze of orange and gold, Nathan stood alone at the edge of the research compound. In his hands, he held Abby's cedar box, its weight familiar after carrying it across continents and through the threshold between life and death. He had discussed this moment with Michael and Rachel, who had understood and supported his decision. This was a private farewell, the fulfillment of a promise that had evolved into something far more profound than he could have imagined when he first set out for Africa. "We made it, Abby," he said softly to the box. "Just like we always said we would. You've seen the Serengeti through my eyes. You've been part of something extraordinary." With careful movements, Nathan opened the box. The evening breeze immediately caught some of the fine ash, carrying it toward the savannah where somewhere a family of lions made their way through the gathering darkness. "Thank you," he whispered, not just to Abby, but to all the forces that had brought him to this moment. The lions who had accepted his help and somehow returned the favor, the son who had found his way back, the granddaughter who had embraced him without reservation, the unknown teacher whose heart now beat in his chest. As the last of the ashes scattered on the wind, Nathan felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but a transition. The weight he had carried for so long, first of grief and then of purpose, transformed into something lighter, something that looked forward rather than back. In the distance, a lion roared, the deep, resonant sound carrying across the plains as Jabari called to his pride. Another answered, then another, the voices of the young lions joining their fathers in a wild chorus that seemed to make the very air vibrate with life. Nathan listened, his hand resting lightly over his transplanted heart, feeling its steady rhythm in counterpoint to the lion's calls. Different hearts, different species, different lives, yet all connected in the great web of existence that stretched across time and space. As darkness fell over the Serengeti, Nathan Wright turned back toward the lights of the research center, where his family waited. Tomorrow they would begin the journey home to Montana, to the new life they were building together. But a part of him would always remain here, where a pride of lions roamed the savanna, carrying with them the memory of an unexpected bond between species. A reminder that sometimes the most profound connections occur when we reach across the boundaries that seem to separate us from one another. The Wright pride would continue, both human and lion, each in their own way, but forever linked by the strange, beautiful alchemy of compassion that had transformed them all. Nathan Wright's journey reminds us that it's never too late for second chances. At 68, facing a terminal diagnosis, he thought his story was ending until an extraordinary encounter with a lioness in need changed everything. Like Nathan, many of us wonder if our best days are behind us, if broken relationships can ever be mended, if we still have purpose as we age. His story shows us that sometimes life's most meaningful chapters begin when we least expect them. The reconnection with his estranged son, the joy of discovering a granddaughter, and the healing that came from helping another living creature. These gifts arrived not despite his age and condition, but because of the wisdom and courage he'd cultivated through decades of living. What unexpected connections might be waiting for you? What broken bonds could still be healed? Like the lions who remembered kindness and returned it in their own way, we're all capable of recognizing and honoring the profound connections that give life meaning. Have you experienced a second chance that changed your life? Or is there a relationship you hope to heal before it's too late? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be the very message someone else needs to hear today.